Welcome to the Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and today we have Sacramento Bee senior staff writer, and in my opinion, one of the most important voices in prep sports in the Sacramento area, Mr. Joe Davidson. What's going on, sir?
Josh, it's good to catch up to you. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. We were just talking about that. Unfortunately, the last time we spoke was right in the middle of COVID. I'm trying to remember. Were we just getting that weird spring football season when we spoke last?
I think so, and it was so unusual. Spring football, it's just unheard of. We're not in Texas, or
Right.
Florida, where high schools play spring football, and have full contact practices, and college recruiters come by. Excuse me, and they have a schedule and fans. It's like that's unheard of here in this
Right.
state. And but in that, as we all know, to refresh, but to in an effort to try to salvage something out of a lost senior season or any academic year, really. If a kid was a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, what's their high school experience supposed to be? It's supposed to be rewarding, positive, make the best of it. And
Right.
and with the lockdowns and school and distance learning, keep people away from each other type of thing, to get sports in, even with smaller schedules and reduced schedules, at least they had something. And I think those high school kids will do football since it's the biggest one and gets the biggest crowds and it's good for revenue. And I think those kids will remember playing football in high school. They'll probably certainly remember it being in April
Right.
during a pandemic, but at least they got to play. But some schools, no, Josh, some schools didn't get to play. The Elk Grove Unified School District, I think, had maybe 2 games.
Right.
Um, they're organized schools, but and then the Cedar Foothill League schools, the Rocklands, Granite Bays, Folsom, Oak Ridge, they get 6 or 7 games in the
Right.
spring, and so it was frustrating for those who didn't get to play. But everybody's playing again. It's been a terrific academic year in high school sports in the Sacramento region. And today I met with our high school boys and girls basketball players of the year for a photo shoot, and um, I couldn't be more impressed with who they are and what they are and what they're all about. And I'm not disclosing their names yet because we want to have some kind of element of surprise. But player A,
Sure.
but they're good students, good kids, well spoken, friendly, appreciate their teammates and their families and their opportunity to play in college. And thinking, you know what, the college ranks are gaining some pretty good student athletes here. Really,
Which
really cool. Every year, we see it all the time.
which I love. And I actually had someone I'm sure you're familiar with, Dan O'Graves, on last week, and
Yes.
had a chance to talk with him. And that was part of the conversation. It's like, man, it's crazy. I mean, even when he was, playing, he was kind of at the start of that whole Folsom run, the run that they're still on. And man, he's like, the Sacramento area in all different sports has kind of become a hotbed for talent. I mean, just look at baseball. I mean, I was just watching the Giants game earlier, and you have all these guys from Elk Grove that are in the game or on the team. And then you have all these guys all across the league that are from Elk Grove or the surrounding areas. And then football, basketball, all these sports. It's like, man, something happened in Sacramento recently where all of this talent and then the incredible amount of coaches with all of this experience and knowledge that are coaching these incredible athletes has seemed to have grown too. So do you have any explanation for why this happened? Because it seems like it's just this boom of coaching and
That's a
athletic
great
talent.
question. It's a great question. And we've had the Sacramento region for decades has been considered a baseball town. And
Sure.
Dusty Baker played high school baseball here in the 1960s at Del Campo, and then Jerry Manuel in the early 70s at Cordova High School. He was a first round draft pick to the Detroit Tigers, Cordova High School in 1972, and three-time manager of excuse me, two-time manager of the year. Dusty was a three-time manager of the year. So there have been spurts like that. We've had first-round picks and over the decades, and then we get this whole surge of these current Elk Grove High School players, J.D. Davis with the Giants, and Nick Madrigal's in the big leagues, and Rowdy Tellez is a slugger for Milwaukee, and excuse me, all on and on and on. In that instance, in this case, those players were all four-year varsity players at Oak Grove High School under Coach Jeff Carlson, and he did a masterful job. Some of the greatest coaching leadership and development of players and teams in section history for any sport. And he would have these 4-year players mentoring the next group of 4-year players. So when JD Davis was a senior, one of these guys we just mentioned was a freshman, and included in that lot was Dylan Carlson,
Right.
who's had a nice young career start with the St. Louis Cardinals, first round pick a few years ago, and the son of Coach Jeff Carlson. And he got to grow up with this. He got to see it before any of the other guys were in high school, because his dad was the coach. So he grew up out there in those baseball fields, and saw what work ethic was all about, and being professional and handling yourself well, and commitment and work ethic and teamwork and just all of that. And it became a perfect firestorm, and superbly coached teams, and they were a juggernaut team, winning championships, section championships. And then these players are they've had catchers and infielders and pitchers. There's just so many guys, and it's a credit to Coach Jeff Carlson, and terrific leadership. And Elko baseball continues to do well. So
Right.
now there are top ranked baseball team entering this week, with before a 3-game series with rival and beat number 2 ranked Franklin, also of Elk Grove. And Joe Bellotti is the coach. It's 6 years. That's no easy task, replacing Jeff Carlson, who had all these terrific players who played in college and got drafted in the first round right out of high school, like Dylan Carlson. But the Thundering Herd keeps going. So Elk Grove baseball has been a factor since the 1960s. And Scott Boras, the super agent, played there in the 1960s. And then Gary Dreyer came along as an incredible, influential baseball coach in the 1980s, and had terrific teams into the 1990s. And I thought he was the best baseball coach I'd ever seen around here, him and Guy Anderson. And then along came Jeff Carlson. And I think he takes the cake. Just a great leader, and an all-metro third baseman at Christian Brothers in the late 80s, and an all-metro football player, linebacker. So a terrific student athlete himself. And so kudos to them. And of course, the rock star in the Carlson family is team mom, Karen Carlson.
Absolutely.
And they have another son named Tanner Carlson, who played at Long Beach State and is now at the University of Texas. And I don't think he's ever had anything less than an A grade in every class he's ever taken. And so they're just great. And and it's I'm long-winded here, but it's just an example of good parenting and good coaching. None of this helicopter parenting. The Carlsons did it the right way, and with discipline and accountability. They didn't take it easy on their kids. Their kids were easy because they were motivated.
Right. It's interesting too. Something you said kind of sparked this, because I had a conversation this past weekend with someone, and they were, they're related. They're married to a coach, and they were basically saying, "Hey, what is it that makes certain athletes motivated, others not? Certain players and certain programs seem to be really competitive, really active, really they put a lot of effort into it, and the other programs not so much." And I'm like, there's probably a lot of reasons to it, but from your perspective, I mean, you have relationships with all these coaches, all these different sports. You've probably seen some of the worst run programs ever, and you've seen like Elk Grove and Folsom, some of the best run programs that you've ever seen. What are some of the common things that help athletes or cause athletes to be more motivated when they're in these programs? Is it just the coaching? Is it the size of the school? Is it the community? Like what it kind of plays a factor in an athlete's motivation and how willing they are to put the work forward?
That's a great question, Josh. And it's something that every coach in any sport, in any era, in any state, but since we're here in Sacramento, I mean, it's something that is a focal point. A lot of coaches will tell you they're okay with a loss, a defeat in a football, basketball, baseball game, as long as the effort was there. Sometimes you just lose to a better team. What drives coaches crazy is a lack of motivation, and sometimes motivation. Why do we have the haves and the have-nots, and I'm working on a big story in the Sacramento Bee on that. We have the haves and have-nots over the decades, and the Folsoms and Granite Bays and Oak Ridges are the haves, and Franklin and Elk Grove and Whitney and Rockland, Granite Bay, they're the haves. And then you have some of the city schools that are the have-nots. And it doesn't mean they don't have good student athletes and good coaches, but they don't have a foundation, or they've lost their way, or they have or been overrun by instability, coaches coming and going, student athletes coming and going, administrators coming and going, athletic directors coming and going. There's no stability. And so why do we have, a school like at Oak Ridge and El Dorado Hills could have this incredible scoreboard with all this signage, and a big digital scoreboard with a lot of sponsorship signage and a lot of income from the community that really backs its community sports and everything. Whereas just down the road at Cordova High School, great tradition, they're not even sure they can get the scoreboard to work for a
Yeah.
football Friday game.
Yeah.
And so that's just down the road. We're not talking 300 miles away in a different county or anything. So we're different that far away. So stability. And Cordova High School was the Folsom of the
Right.
1970s, 80s, and into the 90s. And then what happened? Well, they had 2,400 students in 3 grades. They were a powerhouse in everything: football, basketball, baseball, section champions, nationally ranked, first round picks. Guys went to the NFL. Guys were Major League Baseball players, section championships, and girls track, and really good, and a championship program in girls sports everywhere and across the board. And so how does it end? This machine was just rolling. Well, the Mather Air Force Base closed in 92 or 93 and lost a lot of student athletes there. Discipline, parents are in the military, and the socioeconomic shift changed in Rancho Cordova, where now they're like 1,300 kids. That's a huge drop off from 2,400.
Oh yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
now they've struggled and everything, and they don't have, their proud football program has probably had 3 winning seasons out of the last 15 or something, and coaches coming and going. And I went to a Cordova practice during spring ball during COVID.
Yeah.
And I did a whole Highway 50 tour. I was at Ponderosa, then I stopped, we were at Oak Ridge, then I stopped down at Folsom, all halves, all doing well, huge
Sure.
numbers. And you get to Cordova, just down the road on Highway 50. And Cordova had, eager group of kids, a counselor, I forget his name, I'm sorry. He said, I'm going to become the football coach. These kids need leadership. And I'm a kid from Stockton, and it helped shape my life and mold me. And they didn't have anybody who could throw a football that day in practice. Nobody who could throw a football for simple passing drills.
Right.
You go to Folsom, they got, how many guys do you want that can throw the ball? And so it's just and so that could be a motivation issue, where if you
Sure.
don't have like-minded people around you, then you may not have that motivation. A carrot, and do we take high school sports too serious? Well, if you got a scoreboard, you have people in the stands, then your goal is to win the game.
Right.
Though we know the deeper message is always development and life lessons and all that, but still, if it's a game, you want to win the game. You at least want to be competitive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's a real trend in the last several years with high school football, and I think post-COVID it really ignited, where we had bigger crowds at every high school game than ever before. We always have Thursday night games now. We did this last year, we will this coming fall, because we have a referee shortage. And so the schools have agreed, through a lottery system of sorts, if you draw a straw, you're going to play a Thursday night game to help spread out the officiating on Friday, Saturday, and Thursday. And so these Thursday games could be in Galt, could be in Dixon, could be at Casa Roble, could be at Oak Ridge. They're all packed. And some of these were unranked teams. But the theme I'm getting at, Josh, is if you have a competitive team, your school will, I mean, if your school buys in, it's awesome for the culture of the campus.
Oh yeah.
Because if your high school football season is the start of the academic year and you have a good buzz on campus with your team and the marching band's involved, you got a really fun spirited rooting section. As long as your team's fun, you don't see those kind of crowds when your team is a badly beaten 0-7,
Right.
and they're trying to
Yeah.
just get first down. Bella Vista had a regional record, NorCal record 50-game losing streak or something, and they finally snapped it a couple of years ago. And then this past year, they played a Thursday night game, and they were entertaining and fun. And they had a huge crowd, rooting section alum, and they hadn't been to the playoffs in 20 years. But because they were competitive and fun, people came out and watched on a Thursday, where normally that's a Friday. And um, I was super impressed because they won their first game last year after like 5 straight 0-10 seasons, and they
Yeah.
probably had 4 different coaches or something. There
Sure.
were 3 different coaches during a lot of that. But so yeah, so motivation is you need it because what every team's going to have star power.
Sure.
And we talk about high school football, and you look at Daniel Graves. You talk about Daniel Graves. 2010, he was the national high school football player of the year, Sacramento Bee Player of the Year, state champions. He was super motivated, chip
Yeah.
on his shoulder. I'm overlooked. I'm small. People want to knock me around. And grew up to the Folsom youth system, and was driven and determined to be a leader on that football program. And then Jake Browning did it.
Yep.
And when you have your best players are motivated, what a great leader.
Oh
And
yeah.
all those other guys, and so great coaching there too. And they got all the resources to be good because they have big enrollment and supportive community, and so that should be motivating.
Oh
Parents are
yeah.
motivated.
Well, it's interesting because you've mentioned community a couple of times, and obviously we call this the home team Sacramento podcast. So Sacramento surrounding areas, and we've always said like if you're a coach or an athlete that has this desire to make the people around you, whether it's your athletes or the community better, then we're all part of the same team, right? We want that same goal. Now we want to win when we're competing against each other, but we're
Right.
all achieving the same larger goal. And so when you say community, I always feel like there's this synergy between the high school programs and the community they're in. And when you have a program that's involved in the community, maybe some extracurricular things, maybe it's doing some kind of toy drive. I was talking
Mm-hmm.
to Jackson Watt quite a while ago, and he was on this podcast, and he was saying that they're really involved in the Rockland community in multiple different organizations, and they come out to support the program. It's just this beautiful partnership that happens, and I feel like more programs could really benefit by doing that. And then I think if they did that, and like you said, and if they work hard and they're exciting, then the community is going to want to support them too. So it's really a two-sided thing. But I love that you've brought that up a couple of times, because I feel like that's something we've really tried to push here. And so hearing it from your voice, who's covered sports in the area for
Right.
so long, it just confirms what we've been saying.
No, and it's so good. And I think community involvement should be a mandate. And I think for a lot of programs it is. It would be nice to see them publish it on their school website, or the school district Facebook or social media. I remember running into the Sheldon boys basketball, our regional basketball powerhouse over the last 20 years,
Yeah.
Elk Grove Unified. Deb McCollum real well, of course. And
Yeah. Good friend of mine.
the Sheldon Huskies annually do a turkey drive during Thanksgiving. And
Which is
all their
awesome.
their basketball players, freshman, JV, varsity, they get out there and they are loading crates full of food for a drive for the needy, and the players are refreshed by it.
Yeah.
And you talk about perspective, say, hey, we're okay at home. We got a meal on our dinner table.
Yeah.
These people don't, and you're going to complain about playing time or how tired your legs are after wind sprints. That's a great motivator. It's a good thing. It's a good life lesson to appreciate where you are from. And I have seen some. I've heard run into people, and sometimes I'm at a Sheldon basketball game, and you might ask somebody, "Hey, you had a kid out here," and they'll mention, "Hey, they're involved in community stuff," and we
Yeah.
appreciate that. Some schools have kids who do Read to Achieve. Um, like at Del Oro. I remember doing stories there
Yeah.
15 years ago where members of the Del Oro varsity football team under Coach Taylor, one of the things he thought was important is we got to connect to the community. We could use football as a vehicle for life and understanding and big picture and appreciating things. And you get the varsity football players in their uniform and they go to the elementary school um, in Loomis in Placer County and sit on the floor and read to the kids, little elementary school kids, and the kids look up to these guys. And
Right.
they may have moms and dads who went to Del Oro or siblings who are at Del Oro or cousins or something because it's a town like that. So it's a great way to give back. And those are just a couple of examples. I know St. Francis is involved in that kind of thing, and Jesuits is very giving like that as well. And um, it's a good thing to do. And a lot of young healthy bodies help get out in the community and impact your community. And here's the other thing, Josh, is those high school students could put it on their resume when they're applying to colleges or trying to get a summer job, whether in high school or trying to get a job in college. You put that on there. The volunteer stuff, the Read to Achieve, it's not paid, but it's a commitment. And I
Right.
think employer might go, that I like somebody who goes into their community and helps with a food drive or sits down on the floor in an elementary school class and reads to the kids. That's somebody I would hire.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because like again, last week I was talking to Dano. I hate to keep bringing it back to that podcast, but we talked about a lot of great things. And one of the things I mentioned was I feel like something that kind of goes understated with high school athletes is when they do things like this, like you just mentioned, it's really like their networking starts then and there. Before
Yes.
they even graduate high school, they're networking. And so if they come back, they go to college, they get their degree, they come back into the community, they might be doing business and people might recognize their name from one of your articles because you highlighted some athlete for some great thing they're doing, or they saw them at the toy drive or the clothes drive or the food
Exactly.
drive, and that sticks in their head. It's like, oh, you know what, I like this guy, I like this girl, what they did then, they seem to continue down that road as far as character and integrity. Let's see if we can do business together. And so it really is a good way for them to even network at an early age. And for the program too, I always felt like it's a great look for the program in the community because, like you said, these young kids are looking up to these guys and girls that are putting on these drives and these community events.
Right.
And so that would probably be, as a parent, I imagine they're looking at this program like, hey, they're a really good program. I see some incredible athletes and they're doing a great thing off the field. Like, how do we get involved in what they're doing? It's just a great way to market the program too.
It is, and that takes leadership. It takes coaching leadership or a good athletic director, and a commitment from players to doing it. And I know that at some high schools, if a kid violates the social media protocol and says something stupid, but nothing, where you're going to get expelled or something,
Sure.
they'll or even that maybe a school will require that student has to clean up the trash under the football bleachers during on a Wednesday.
Right. Right.
To what are they going to do? Make you run laps? No, go have them pick up some trash.
Right.
And nobody wants to do that again.
Sure.
So message, be cool on social media, which we've talked about. Social media. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness!
I was gonna say,
If there's a black eye on this academic year for the Sacramento region, Josh, it would be the blunders of social media during
yeah.
football season. So we had the Amador High School up in Sutter Creek, they're just outside of our coverage area.
Hmm.
They'll play our teams in the section playoffs, and they had a big scandal that broke out. We had some football players who started a group chat. We broke the story. We don't like doing these kind of stories. They're no fun.
Hmm.
We'd rather chronicle the achievements of what's going on, but it's news. And one of the posts was "Kill the Blacks" as they were
Mm.
getting ready to play a Sac City Unified team in Rosemont, and that's just not cool. It's not funny. Um, I don't think these students had any idea how bad that looks, how insensitive it is, and so an hour, maybe a half hour before those two teams were going to kick off, the administrators caught wind of this social media thread going on and canceled the game.
Mm.
And then they launched a big investigation, and I was able to track down one of the players, a big colleague of mine was, and we got to run it in the story, and where he said, "Oh, we were just kidding, blah blah blah." We were referring to jersey colors. No,
Right.
not good enough. And so they investigated and they suspended the season. The superintendent agreed, said we're going to pull the plug on this season. And people up in Sutter Creek, small community, they love their sports. They were split. This is that serves them right, or should only sideline the offenders. And other people were saying this is an outrage, freedom of speech, blah blah blah. No, this is a bad look, and you've got to be smarter. And you can't. And you've already signed paperwork
Right.
saying that you're not going to do anything that embarrasses your school. And then literally a week or two later, if that, Josh, we get news out of River Valley High School in Yuba
Hmm.
City, and the football team. By the way, one thought on the previous team, that
Sure.
team was 0-5, 0
Oh,
and 3. They were going nowhere.
sure.
And maybe that's explains why, well, geez, where's the leadership here? Where's the senior leadership on that team?
Sure.
If you're going to be
Yeah.
doing that, because they're just kind of have lost their their way. So, anyways, River Valley High School of Yuba City, they had a video clip on social media where I think they had a couple of their black teammates were standing up in the front of a classroom for a mock slave auction, like purchasing a player.
Yeah, I saw. I couldn't believe that.
Was that funny? No. Is it just a horrible look? Is it just just blatantly insensitive? Just read your history. That's not cool. And so they suspend the team and they investigate and they crack down on a couple of the kids and they end their season. Their season was squashed. And I think they were like 0-6 and or 0-5. And so I think both schools had the rest of their season to play. So their opponents wound up without an opponent.
Right.
It's too late to schedule anybody. I mean, so that's lost experiences, lost revenue, lost memories. And some people who don't really fully get it, Josh would say, well, those kids missed out on scholarship opportunities. There could have been colleges watching them. No, no, no.
Right.
It's not just for the one kid who might have a chance. It's for the whole school. But all those cheerleaders who
Yeah.
work so hard to have and then you lose a game, and not just win or lose, but you don't have a contest. And then literally another week later, we had another incident at Capital Athletic League varsity football game, um, Del Campo at Vista Del Lago.
Right.
And somebody got into the locker room of the Del Campo team at the Vista Del Lago site. Each team gets a locker room. And somebody wrote on the whiteboard at halftime some racial stupidity. I can't remember what it was, but it was just amateur, juvenile, stupid, offensive, and just idiotic. And the Del Campo coaches walked in after the game, and it's like, what is this? So the coach has to explain to his players. He's got several black players. This is what we're living with and dealing with. And, he's irked, and he was refreshed that the Matt Costa, Del Campo coach, was refreshed that the Vista Del Lago coach was understanding and supportive, and so was the school district. And so let's figure this out. And I think they concluded that it was a couple of middle school students who portrayed themselves as Vista Del Lago people and just walked in there trying to just is that cool? There's nothing funny about that. And
Right.
so that was a blunder. And no season was suspended. They couldn't. They're trying to maybe pin it on Vista Del Lago. No, I think Vista Del Lago people were focused on the varsity football game.
Right.
So that
Sure.
was just and here's another reason why you don't do this kind of stuff besides it being just wrong and stupid. But there's video cameras all over schools now.
Right. Right.
So they were able to figure that out in quick order, like that night.
Yeah.
And so not smart. Um and there's been some incidents in the Sac City Unified where some graffiti and the N words spray painted or something, and then video shows that it was people of color doing that, trying to just get a rise out of that's just that what's going on here? What are you doing? And
Right.
so those are tough decisions for school administrators. How do we punish these kids? And that you need a wake up call that this is not okay. And the other
Sure.
thing that drives me nuts is any measure of hazing.
Yeah.
When was hazing ever cool? Oh, well, we got to make them tougher. We got to make them. No, this is your brother. What do they always say in sports, John? That's my brother. We're
Right.
family. And you got brothers and family supposedly heckling and hazing each other. That batters a team morale, and coaches lose jobs. And it buckled the Napa High School football program 10 years ago or so with that kind of scandal. And
Right.
the coach was a homegrown star player there, lost his job. They almost folded the football program permanently. The principal, I can't remember his name, was quoted in the Napa Valley Register by the great Marty James, now retired. And he said, if we don't find a quality football coach in 1 month, we will fold this program, because
Wow.
nobody wanted that job and the community was divided. So the point being, why, Hayes, what are you doing? Don't do it, because people talk and
Yeah.
I did a big story last year, Josh, about this time about the UC Davis baseball program that was
I was going to
nearly
say that's the first thing
shelved
that came to
because of
mind. Yeah.
horrific hazing
Right.
and cost all those coaches their job.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of players were not brought back.
Right. Right.
Is it worth it?
Right.
And I don't want to be. I mean, the studies, the investigation of that showed, and people were saying, well, what's the big deal? These kids are too soft. And no, when these student athletes were forced or you know um, bullied or hazed or pressured into taking various shots out of a shot glass, it could
Yep.
be whiskey or it could be urine. Well, how is that funny?
Right.
And so, um, sometimes you have those kind of issues. And fortunately, we have mostly good stuff to report on and good teams and achievements. But it's life, man. I mean, remember the Oak Ridge girls soccer Northern California championship game over a year ago, where an Oak Ridge student did a monkey sound
Right.
during a NorCal regional championship soccer game while the soccer star for a area team, Buchanan, I can't remember her name, but a black student athlete, terrific student athlete, great student going to Fresno State on full scholarship. And she's trying to do a penalty kick and she hears a monkey sound. And it's just outrageous. What are you doing, man? And I wrote a story right away on that, which is horrible because you don't want to be, I mean, geez, is this really happening?
Right.
What's going on? And this guy, a business owner in El Dorado Hills, writes me a long email and said, we don't do that. This is completely outrageous. This is clickbait. You should be ashamed. This is how far journalism has come. And I wrote back, hey, I appreciate you reaching out. I said, but you're wrong. Here's the audio. We hadn't posted that yet because our photographer was trying to get it all Javier Mascarenas. And he wrote back and said, oh my goodness, I was at that game and I didn't hear it, but it's clear as a bell in the audio. I'm embarrassed for our community. And the Oak Ridge soccer players, and I made sure I reported this too, because it's full reporting. The Oak Ridge soccer players, while the player who was heckled with the monkey sounds, they consoled her and said, "This is not what we're about. We're sorry."
Yeah.
The student athlete who did that was a varsity football player who had a scholarship offer in the Big Sky Conference, and it was revoked.
Jeez.
Because when you sign a letter of intent, part of that is you don't embarrass your school. And so that's how costly it is. The thing that was really troubling out of that is that the student athlete in particular didn't know why it was a big deal. He said, "Hey, I do it all the time." Well,
Well,
didn't somebody in the stands say, "Hey, man, dude, don't do that. That's
yeah,
not funny." That stuff used to happen to Matt Barnes in 1996, 97 when he was a basketball football star at Del Campo High School, well before his UCLA years and 12 years in the NBA, now doing really good media work for ESPN and also on the Kings broadcast.
he's great.
And people would wave bananas at him and heckle him. And that was, we're still doing it 25 years later.
That's wild.
Yeah. And you know what? It pained him. It took him years and some of it were Del Campo students. And he did not want to be associated with Del Campo, didn't want his jersey retired. And then finally he said, it's a good thing now. And but it's just awful, awful. So
Yeah, no, it's and like you said, you kind of joked about it. It seems like we've talked about social media every time, and unfortunately, we kind of have to because it's such a problem. And we've always said, when you do something dumb like that, you may think, hey, it's just a fun thing, but the bottom line is, like you said, everybody has a camera, everybody's filming everything. Not everybody has your best interest in mind, and so yeah, like that's just ammo for someone to use at any point when they want to embarrass you, and then potentially, in some ways, ruin your life. And I've always had an issue with I guess when you have people that jump in and say, hey, well, they're just kids. When you hear these stories at the high school level, they're just kids. They're doing, they're having fun. They're being silly. They're being stupid. But I always look at as you mentioned, the UC Davis situation, those were college age kids. They were at that next level, playing at the higher level when they have more access to more things and they can, get into more trouble potentially. And it's like, well, you can see what happens if that's not checked at a certain point. The higher you go, the more resources and access you have to things and potentially more trouble you can get into. So I've always felt like you need coaches and leaders at the younger age to say, hey, if you want to, I mean, I remember at a character combine years ago, Jerry Manuel said, hey, your foundation has to be solid. Your character foundation has to be solid because each level you build on top of that house, that foundation has to be able to withstand the weight and the pressure of each level you build up. And so I think that's part of the problem is that some people's foundation is pretty weak. And so they want to
mhm.
go to that next level, but when they have, access to so many more things, they can't handle it. They can't handle the pressure. They can't handle all the access. And then they make bad decisions. They haze people. And then, they lose it all simply because they weren't prepared for it. And so I mean, I know, like you said, a lot of people say, hey, they're just kids, but I mean, you have to teach them at some point, right?
No good, no kidding. And social media is such a fun, good thing. Instagram, Twitter,
Yeah.
TikTok, and you have a good time, but you could also really ruin yourself, like you said
Right.
and alluded to. Even hitting like on a
Right.
profile or a post. And I've been asked to talk to character combine sessions or to high school football teams. And can you talk about social media? And I'd say the same thing I just told you. It could be a fun thing. I said, but you could also ruin yourself on it
Right.
because a college recruiter is going to somebody's going to thumb through your social media just to make see who they're dealing with, and they could pull the plug or just look elsewhere. And I have a theme, Josh. If you're not mature enough to handle social media, then don't engage in it. Don't do it, and don't bring shame to you, your family, and your school with immaturity.
Right.
Think before you hit send or publish or post or something. And um fortunately, I don't remember too many instances where social media. There was a football player, an all metro football player at Folsom High. Can't even remember the year. Last 5 years,
Ah,
pre-COVID,
yeah.
and he was an all metro lineman, and he was a 4.0 student. And then he posted some kind of he was caught in some kind of chat forum on social media where he was trying to tease one of his football teammates about dating a girl of color,
Hmm.
and it just sounded juvenile, sophomore, offensive, and it's a no, and it upset people. And hey, by the way, man, that violates the code of conduct for Folsom High School, blah blah. And so I catch wind of it, and the dad reaches out and said, "Can you tell our story?" Um, and he said, "We're terribly disappointed, not in any punishment, not the fallout, but my son knows better." And he goes, "I think sometimes they get caught up in this and they just think they're being funny and they don't think." And because the kid was an all-metro kid and he was a good student, I knew he was not a dummy. So I
Sure.
said, let's do that story. Let's hear his side, not trying to defend him. Let
Sure.
him explain himself. And he said, I was wrong and mature, just geez. And um, Saul Patu, the head football coach at Capital Christian, um, was invited by the family, if memory serves, and he spoke to the student athlete as a man of color and said, "These have consequences. You got to be smarter, blah, blah, blah." And they had a really frank conversation that added to the story.
Yeah.
And the kid was so disappointed in his own action. He did something remarkable that I've never seen before. He said, "I am resigning from the football program." He was going to be a returning senior, and he stepped away from I think he transferred. He just said, "It's not fair for this school that I'm, that's that guy who did that." And so I don't know, it'd be worth catching up to him and saying, where is he now? I probably, he probably did just fine, probably in college somewhere, but tough lesson.
Sure.
And I appreciate, hey, they didn't call me to say, can you defend us? I'm not an attorney. No, let's
Right.
just hear both sides. And the dad was very disappointed in his son. Said, we can't. That's not how we raised him. And he was very frank about it. I thought I was flattered because they said you have a good reputation, people. And I talked to the principal, Howard Cadenhead, said we can't do this. And I talked to the head coach, Paul Doherty, and it was a very balanced story. Some people jump to conclusions without reading the story. Oh, you're defending the kid. This is what's wrong with me. No, I didn't read the story. He's the one who said, "Hey, I blundered. I'm stepping away from the program."
Wow.
So it's not defending anybody. It's listening to, a lot of schools just won't do that. And I'm not looking to, we got a hold of a football player at Sutter up there at Sutter Creek at Amador High, where he said about the social media post,
Sure.
um, kill the blacks, and he tried to downplay it and everything. Um, but we didn't put his name on there. He said it off the record, knowing it was going to be published, but with uh, he wanted to be anonymous, and we respected that.
Sure.
Just to get a voice, but we're not seeking. I did not look into anybody who did the slave auction video at River City or River Valley High. I'm not even going to attempt to talk to have them rationalize why they
Sure.
did that.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, man, I don't, obviously you're great at your job, but I definitely don't envy what you have to do because I can imagine that those stories, like you said, they're not fun to write, but you also have to, that's your job. You got to put it out there. And so, man, I can't even imagine, I mean, you've done this for a long time, so I'm sure you've come to terms with it and you're used to it now, but man, early on, that must have been tough to find that balance of like, tell the story, but at the same time, like this doesn't feel great. And I know I'm going to get some, hate for this.
Oh yeah, and it's you take some pride too. It said, there's an old saying in media, own your beat. And I've been at the B since 1989, and I have owned my beat. Nobody's gonna, we had more thorough reporting on each of those incidents we just talked about. The football team A folds because of this social media thing. The Monkey Sounds heckling, the River Valley thing, the Del Campo whiteboard thing, and you be thorough. You have contacts and resources that for years, and they work with you. Some of it's just only school district statements and maybe an interview, but others are the coaches are talking, the students talking, blah blah blah. Um, and yeah, people, we had another one. Here's the probably the worst one of them all that we could see, that we saw.
Sure.
at least in video, was the Intercom versus Reardon of San Francisco basketball game in the NorCal playoffs.
Yeah.
And Intercom's a powerhouse basketball team, and I really like their coach, Fred Wilson. And I did a story on two of their senior guards, Jalen Glenn and Jermaine Halliburton, both terrific kids, good leaders, good people. And at late in their game, as the game was winding away, there was a rebound by Reardon, and an Intercom guy went over to foul him to stop the clock so it doesn't just run out on him. But he fouled him pretty hard, and the Reardon guy took offense of it and shoved him, and then you had chaos. And then the guy who did the shoving from Reardon, the San Francisco school, winds up decked flat on his back. Somebody cold cocked him. What is going on? I saw the whole video. We posted the video. Oh, you only posted the video for clickbait? No, we posted it because it's a story. We
Right.
don't want to be doing it, but we got to do it. A brawl marred a high school basketball game in Northern California, and the referees called it with a minute 40 to go. And so this, or 40 seconds to go or whatever, and it's over. And it's a bad look for both schools, and both schools suspended players, and Reardon won, but didn't have its full complement of players. Some kids, but a lot of the kids stayed on the bench, because if you clear the bench, you get ejected. And an ejection in high school sports means you have an automatic following game sit out. And, it's like, oh, are we reporting on this? I mean, I was irked. I said, what are we doing? What's, these kids, you got to know better. You can't just, your family's watching it. Everybody starts jumping out of the stand, and it's just chaos. And, and it's unfortunate because it's not reflective of the kids and the coach and the school at
Right.
Intercom. They're not those kind of kids. But people get emails and social media. Oh, that's typical. And, of course, those kids. No, we haven't had stories on that. News side, TV side, radio side, my side, whatever, on bad behavior there. It's just it got out of control. But those two players I mentioned, Glenn and Halliburton, were not involved in the fracas.
Yeah.
And it's emotions spill over. Josh, we forget that these kids are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and they got the weight of the world on them to make a free throw, to execute a play. And we expect them to be mature and classy all the time. And yeah, you're gonna have emotions boil over, but you can't be brawling. You just can't.
Right.
And some of those kids, if they're returning seniors next year or juniors, they may set out games. The CIF has that authority to say, because it was a playoff event, it was a CIF event. If it was a regular
Sure.
season event, then that's a school or district policy.
Man. Yeah. I would love to know too, something you mentioned a couple of times, these people that reach out to you and have something to say about everything you say. I would love to know where they find all this time in the day to do this all the time. Because I feel like you get this. I mean,
Well, and
I
it's
follow you. It's like, man, this is wild.
yeah, it's crazy. And it's interesting. I have a policy. If somebody takes the time to reach out,
Sure.
instant message, direct message, email, not so much voicemail, but definitely email, I will take the time to write back. And
Sure.
most of the time, they're stunned that I wrote back. If they were snarky and you're an idiot, it's clickbait, and you shame on you. I love the shame on you. Shame
Sure.
on you. And I'm thinking, wow, it sounds like my grandmother talking to me since I ate the last cookie or something at church. And some people they turn out to be wonderful. Oh, thank you for clarifying. You wrote back. I appreciate it. Gee, I'm a
Sure.
little embarrassed. Or some just keep piling on. I did this big story on Dean Stark, one of the great winners in section history. Get him on a podcast. So he has been the varsity boys basketball coach at Sacramento Waldorf Sacramento Waldorf School off the American River in Carmichael area since 1986.
Wow.
And this season, he became the winningest basketball coach, boys or girls, in Sac Joaquin section history. With he's got more than 700 and something wins now, and
Jeez.
no, he's closing in on 700. And he just he's just refreshing in his approach and his discipline and teaching the game and life lessons. And and all these small school kids, private school kids, they don't have any life issues. Yeah, they have mothers who die of illness. They have mental health issues, concerns, I should say. They have classmates who have committed suicide or died in motorcycle accidents. Hey, it hits them there too. So, anyways, he's always been known as a great sportsman and a great winner and a classy loser. And I did this big, huge story on him, and the Dean Stark way and his loyalty. He's never left. And the Sacramento Kings lead counsel, their lead lawyer, and I don't have his name right now, played for Coach Dean Stark and said, "This man is the most influential person in my life." And so I read this big story, and weeks later, they're in about 3 weeks later, they're in a section basketball. They're about to play for the section division 6 section basketball championship at Golden One. And I get this long, rambling, rip job email. And she left her name, and she's just thought, this is outrageous. Why would you report on Dean Stark? I saw him once and he was out of control. He bullies kids. He curses kids. He does none of those things. And she just went on, and you're just a big fan of his, just was disgusted. I don't know if she punctuated with a shame on you, but I wrote back, thanks for reading, thanks for, and I said, I don't agree with you. And she just couldn't stop saying, then they play another game. I think it was a semifinal. She said, there you are, you're on the bandwagon with Coach Stark again, and you make him Superman. I'm thinking, and then she goes to the section finals
Oh
at
my gosh.
Golden One because she's somehow connected with the Forest Hill basketball program, and they played the game right before Dean Stark. Then she watches Dean Stark, and Dean Stark's best player went down, Eli Newhouse, in the first minute of the game, 6'7", best player, and he's out for the game with a bad ankle, and they get run over by Valley Christian of Roseville and their great coach, Brad Gunter. And so she sent me an email. So, I can't believe you reported on him. I just couldn't stand it. And I just, you're wrong. You're just wrong. And she said, why don't you do a story that people would really respect and profile the Forest Hill girls basketball coach? But I could even help you with questions since you don't know what you're doing. But no, you won't do it. And I'm thinking, thanks for the advice.
Jeez.
And I'm thinking, and I said, well, thanks for reading. And she goes, I don't read your crap. Why would I waste time reading your crap? I said, well, you read the Dean Stark story.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just, so I'm trying to be nice. Hey, thank you. And the doc I concluded, I didn't type it. I could have put it in the subject line. Happiness is a choice. I mean, is it worth being so miserable about? I was waiting for the punctual, the emphatic line of "watch your back." I've gotten those kind of emails. I've gotten those kind of voicemails. You better watch your back.
Oh, I bet.
I should watch my back during this podcast, but
You never know.
But you know what?
Me
Mostly,
too.
Josh, mostly people are really nice.
That's
I
good.
went to section basketball finals, 12 games over 2 days, covered 10 of them. Yeah, it's tiring, exhausting, but this is a story for their scrapbook on how these teams got here, win or lose. And then I went to the state finals a couple weeks later at Golden One. And during those two events, and even during March Madness, also at Golden One, just a ton of people, former players, former coaches, current players, current coaches, administrators, just came up just to say hello. And longtime readers who I'm not sure who they are came up and said hello, and so it's like, you feel validated. It's like, this is great. These people appreciate it. I was very flattering. That's your audience, and they remember a story from 25 years ago or 15 years ago. And the same thing happened when I went to the Sacramento Rivercats season opener last week. the guy at the media check-in point, he recognized me. Oh, you covered my son. He played at El Camino High School in the late '90s. He's in the military. He's a lieutenant colonel. He's super proud. He's a retired lawyer. He goes, I just do the river catch. He couldn't have been more tickled that we ran into each other. And I thought, this is so cool. He gave me his phone number. I said, send me an email sometime. He was so appreciative of the work that we've done over the years. And I thought, that's so cool. Thank you. Because every once in a while you'll get a guy, oh, you're fake news. Fake. I don't think I've ever reported on anything that was fake.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so mostly they're really good. And you're gonna get snarky people on social media. And every once in a while I used to fire back and say, says a nobody.
Yeah. I'm
And
sure they
then
love that.
yeah. And then I just didn't do it anymore. Then you just got this long thread of just finger pointing like we're out there in the playground,
Sure.
uh, that kind of thing. But I tell you, social media is great for what I do.
Oh yeah,
A lot
absolutely.
of engagement on Twitter and Facebook and on Instagram, and that's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
that's you want to engage with people and and all that. So, and I have to remind myself to be smart on social media. You don't want to do anything and get you in hot water. Isn't that a
Sure.
great old term? Hot water as
Right.
compared to cold water.
Right. Hey, I mean, I've always told people, man, it's a tool, and just like you gotta be respectful of a tool. You can't just swing a circular saw around the room, right? Because it can be dangerous. But if you use it correctly, it's incredibly beneficial to whatever you're trying to do. Same thing with social media, man. If you respect it, you use it for what it's meant to be used for, then it's a really powerful thing that connects people and helps build up the community. So, um, I love hearing your perspective on that as always. And like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. So I just have one more question for you. I could do
Sure.
this. I could do this all day, Joe. But I want to, like I said, I know you're busy. I want to be respectful. Um, something that was really interesting to me. Again, last two podcasts that I've done here, Daniel Graves was one. Prior to that was Matt Johnson from Sac High basketball,
Oh
and
my goodness, is he an impressive guy?
oh, that was
Matt
both those
Johnson.
guys were incredible. But yeah, that was my first time. Well, actually, first time talking to both those guys, but they were both kind enough to join and both back to back. But one of the things that was really interesting is when I was asking them, hey, who was an athlete that you admired? And the funny thing was they both mentioned guys that they played with. Uh,
Oh,
Matt
yeah.
mentioned Kevin Galloway, saying the best athlete he's
Yes.
ever played against. And then Dano said Tyler, no, yeah, Tyler.
Trozine.
I would Trocine. I was gonna say Tanner, but it was Tyler Trocine. And I thought it was interesting that they both said guys that they played with at the high school level, and those guys played at higher levels than that. They played against some pretty incredible talent. But they both said, "Hey, this guy that I played with in high school played on the same team as him. Best athlete I've ever seen." So that being said, you've covered a lot of sports. Who would you say is the best athlete from the Sacramento area that you've ever covered?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of them.
It's like picking
I'll
your
try to
favorite
go in
kid.
order. I remember my high school years were up in Oregon. I graduated high school and I came down to Davis, where my dad, stepmom lived. It was my mom and stepdad who were farmers up in Oregon. And so I worked at the Davis Enterprise in 84, 85, and 86. And Mark Hicks was a remarkable all-time great athlete and national running back recruit, played at Cal, played a little pro football, just a prince of a guy. That was one. Daniel Graves was certainly one. Shaq Thompson for Grant
Oh
High
yeah,
School was a remarkable athlete. You're looking at him, you're thinking, I'm not an NFL evaluator, but that guy looks like he could be in the
yeah,
NFL someday. And he was
yeah.
just bigger than everybody and strong instincts. And the great thing about Shaq, this is what's great about doing local sports, is I think he's going to be a starter again for the seventh year in a row for
Hmm.
the Carolina Panthers, and 3 or 4 times he's been nominated by his peers as an NFL Man of the Year, meaning he gives back to his community in
Yep,
Sacramento and in
yep.
Charlotte. In fact, at the end of this month, he's going to have a free football camp again for kids at American River College. That's just what
Wow,
he does.
it's
And
incredible.
so he's Eric Armstead in football and basketball was impressive. so many girls athletes. I saw one this season in Cameron Mafua of Folsom, 6'2" junior post with ball handling skills, guard skills, who's going to play at any big university she wants to. Mackenzie Forbes was a McDonald's All-American who played basketball several years ago at Folsom High School, and played and finished up at Harvard. I mean, how smart is that? And so there's just been so many baseball guys, those Elk Grove kids we talked about, Dylan Carlson, Nick Madrigal, J.D. Davis. I saw him hit towering home runs in high school, and Rowdy Tellez hit the farthest high school baseball I've ever seen, and it landed over a fence and slammed up against a doghouse. Think about how that wording. It
Yeah.
bounced over the center field fence way out there into a neighborhood, into a yard, and the ball finally slammed up against the. I mean, that's just a
Jeez.
rocket shot.
Yeah.
And so, guys like that. And he did a left-handed hitter at Rayleigh Field, the River Cats Field, now Sutter Health Park. And in the rain, heavy kind of air, and he hit a home run to left over the left field fence. And Jeff
Oh my
Carlson, the
gosh.
coach, said, unbelievable. And he's in the big league swatting home runs. So,
Yeah. Doing pretty
um,
well.
I'm trying to think of basketball. Jordan Ford's another one from Folsom.
Hmm.
Sheldon's had a lot of good basketball players. De'Arrow Williams and Dakari Allen were either both 4-year varsity players who went to San Diego State and were
Yeah.
4-year players there. And so they're ecstatic that San Diego State was in the national championship.
Oh, I
We've got
bet.
so many good ones, and they're not going away. We still get we keep getting every year we get a new crop. And this is such a large area, small schools, medium-sized schools, the large powers, they're everywhere. And the best linemen I've ever seen in high school, there's two of them. Teddy Bruschi
Yeah.
went on to play at Arizona out of Roseville High, played in the Super Bowl 5 times for the New England Patriots. Um, I did a story in the Sacramento Bee in 2000 and named him our all-time #1 greatest high school football player ever, based on high school achievements only. He'd probably still be at #1 unless the guy I'm going to mention now replaces him, and that's Jonah Williams, who was a high
Yeah.
school All-American tackle at Folsom. Started 3 years at left tackle at Alabama under coach Nick Saban, who never started, a true freshman on the offensive line, and was a first round pick by the Cincinnati Bengals, and is a star.
Yeah.
And so you name it, skill guys, guys in the trenches, basketball players, softball players, pretty cool. And every year you don't know what's going to be next.
Right. And it's like, it's kind of full circle. Like you said, the Sacramento area has become this hotbed of talent. And like you said, there's no end in sight. So it's a very exciting time to be talking to you, to be talking to all the coaches and athletes that we talk to on this podcast, because there's just so much wisdom, so much insight, so much experience that I'm just selfishly trying to pull, out of all of you guys. And so I'm very grateful that, I can do this podcast in our home team. And I'm grateful that you were willing to come on our show and share a little bit. Like I said, we could do this forever, but I want to let you go. So that being said, if people want to continue hearing what you have to say and seeing what you write, where can they follow you? Website, handles on Twitter, social, all that stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So Twitter, real easy, SacB at Joe D, or just type in Joe Davidson, SacB.com. Easy to find. And, we're so thankful, Josh, for all the, the readers and followers and people who appreciate it. And our fellow media people, it's always good to catch up with you. And, I think we see the same thing, that high school sports, youth sports, just sports in general, it can be such a good thing for so many reasons.
Absolutely.
And look at Daniel Graves. Daniel Graves is in real estate now, I think.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
don't think he can handle a room? The guy handled a football team in a state championship in the mud muck, for a state championship, and he found a way. And so, no doubt, learned a lot of life lessons, and that help him now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm
What we got?
100% on board with that. The life lessons from sports, It's such an important part of our community, all the different schools, all the different programs. And so that's why I do what I do. And I know that's definitely why you do what you do. So, Joe, man, I appreciate the time as always. And I look forward to catching up and continuing to read all of your great work as we continue to move through the rest of the school season.
Thanks, Josh. We'll see you soon, man.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care.